Okay, thank you very much, Jamian, both for this introduction and also for having me once again. Um, and also thank you very much the Shang Institute UK, who is always interested in the things that I might be able to share. So I will go directly into our topic, taking it a bit from a distant angle, let's say. The topic of biographies is in general quite complicated when we come to the Tibetan world. It is complicated for many reasons. Maybe for those of you who have a vicinity to the Tibetan world, you will know that lineages, tulkus, all kinds of different masters have different names, places have different names, and so on and so forth. So for a scholar, let's say, the reconstructing a biography or reasonably uniforming a biography is very difficult. Particularly, this concerns more recent masters for which we have actual histories. But for biographies of older masters, meaning masters whose lives are, let's say, older than 1,000 years, and they go back in a kind of very difficult and non-historic world, it is a little bit different. We need to approach things in a slightly different way. The reason for this is that those biographies are not intended to be histories of lives in the sense in which we understand it. In recent years, you might have noticed, I mean, this century, the previous century, and starting from the 1900, there has been an approach towards biographies that was looking to kind of reduce or historicize or secularize biographies, taking away everything that was not compatible or even possible from the point of view of empiric materialistic worldview of the scholars that analyze these biographies. So particularly, for example, this you might note very easily if you compare, for example, biographies of Buddha Shakyamuni, which have been transmitted or written in the West, in which he appears very much as a kind of rationalistic scholar, master who looks at the world phenomena, his individual being, his senses, and so on and so forth, his mind, from a very rational and logic and modern point of view. But if you look at traditional biographies of the Buddha, Shakyamuni, everything is very much more rooted in a larger context. There are many things that are not definitely and willingly explainable from a rational point of view, or at least they do not belong to the empiric world that is the object of our normal human perspective. This is because biographies were understood, I think, in my opinion, more like works of art rather than histories. With this, I mean a complex structure that is set out to obey to the needs of traditional Tibetan art, which is to be a medium for the transmission of the teachings. So art, in this sense, in the traditional Indo-Tibetan world, but I think all of the East was like that, and also the West was very much in this order of ideas up to not so long ago. So the idea is to conceive of a biography not in order to represent the chronicles or the empiric history of some individual, but to transmit how to transmit the content, the thing that is symbolized beyond the informations that are given in the biography itself. So, for example, if you look at this picture that we have used, that I have used as a kind of a cover for this this talk, this is a image of our main topic tonight, the master Sri Simha. And if you look at this picture, I think no one would ever dream to kind of try to take away all the elements that are not empiric, that are not historical, and produce a painting or imagine a painting that is without all these elements of symbol, of teaching, of transmission, and so on and so forth. We need to look at biographies in the same way as we look at these painting, as a kind of representation of the way how, particularly biographies in Tibetan, they are called namtar. No? Namtar means, translates Sanskrit vimoksha, and is a word that refers to complete liberation, or the history of complete liberation, meaning that it is meant to represent the path that someone has, transversed or gone through in order to reach the goal of enlightenment, moksha or vimoksha. So, for our in other words, biographies are not meant to kind of appeal to a dogmatic response from the part of the observer or the reader in this case, or the listener. Rather, it is not a matter of belief, but rather a matter of understanding the language that is spoken, the symbols that are used, the metaphors that are taken into consideration, and so on and so forth. So this is from this perspective, within biographies, anything can actually happen. All the normal limits in which we are used to live, such as, for example, space and time, are completely overcome. The limits of space and time lay way beyond the possibilities of the spirit, let's say, of the enlightened mind. No? So in these biographies, we find very often, particularly the old, these old biographies, let's say, before the 8th or 9th century current era, like the biographies of Padmasambhava and the masters. When we are talking about the Dzogchen lineage, the master that came before him, for example, Sri Simha and going back Manjushri Mitra, Karadorje, and so on and so forth. We will see those closer in a few minutes. I'm sorry, I have a bit of a cough here and there that might be. I hope it's not too annoying for you. So the biographies are part of a world in which everything that one perceives is being understood as carrying a meaning. Obviously, not only, official explicit teachings by masters and so on and so forth, but rather everything that happens, even how the birds fly and these kind of omens, these kind of things are considered to be messages that are all under the general law of cause and effect, and thus they are well organized, and thus they mean something. Okay, so within the biographies, we can we need to look for these omens. Let's say they are inserted there to transmit the message, the core of the teaching. Now, in Tibet, particularly speaking, biographies are part of a larger chain, a larger concept that is that of lineages. Lineages, of course, are extremely important because they are the kind of chain, or if you like, highway that links the individual practitioner who generation after generation receives the same teachings from disciple to master to disciple to master to disciple to master, back to a divine principle that is generally represented as an emanation of some deity, some Buddha, some Bodhisattva. For example, in the Dzogchen teachings, the origin, the prime origin of the teachings themselves and all the text and so forth is considered to be I'm sorry, is considered to be Vajrasattva. So this being able to trace, not in an historical way, but rather in a more meta-historical, we could say, way, to trace back what I have got and what I am practicing, me as a practitioner, back to the very principle to which I want to go back by practicing these teachings. So in a way, the lineages are like the line that we have back to the state that we want to realize the fruit of where the path is supposed to take us. Okay, so let's come to our topic a little bit closer. Sri Simha. Sri Simha is, you can see him here in the picture. He is represented iconographically as a Mahasiddha, a Mahasiddha of India, or Rinzin Chenpo, or Ngodul Chenpo, or Druptop, sorry, in Tibetan. These kind of yogis, that live on the outskirts of society, normally in cremation grounds and so on and so forth, in the company of other yogis and yoginis and dakinis and dakas. And they are generally sitting very loosely. I have always the impression that their representation is very much windy in a way, it kind of inspires movement with these drapes of cloth and the position they have, and also the loose lotus position and so forth. A characteristic of Sri Simha is that he has the right arm in this position, pointing with the finger generally to the sky. Probably, I'm not sure what kind of mudra that might be, what kind of hand gesture that might be, but it is probably kind of, pointing out to some principle, maybe even the sky as the container and the best analogy we have to emptiness. And he also is represented with these bowls behind. This one in particular, the one which is red, yellow, and green, and orange, and blue also in the lower part, or even this blue circle here behind. Sometimes they have very big containers, vases like this. Generally speaking, these are containers that in which the master put all their belongings, particularly the ritual belongings, such as I don't know, maybe when he doesn't have it in his hand, the kapala goes back there, the skull cup that he has in his left hand, or the vajra, or the text from which he reads, or any implement he might need ritually, both to celebrate his rituals or to also empower disciples and so forth. So Sri Simha, we can kind of put him in the category of the tantric Mahasiddhas in terms of how he is depicted in the iconography. So sometimes he is also more in a pandita situation. These images I took from the Himalayan art website. It's a very useful and beautiful website that collects a lot of Tibetan art. He is also depicted, as I would say, in a pandita fashion. So he has a book in his left hand, a Tibetan book typically. He is dressed more like a monk. He has a pensha, a pandita hat, and also he has the right hand in the Abhaya mudra, the mudra of fearlessness. Okay, but I like this better. I go back to this. So Sri Simha is a crucial master in the transmission of the Dzogchen teachings, in particular for this transmission to reach Tibet after him. Dzogchen in these biographies is normally referred to as being a teaching that is beyond cause and effect. And this is a very all the masters, they are said in their biographies to be in search for the teaching beyond cause and effect. What does that mean? It means that other or differently from the sutras up to the tantras, the approach is to look at the world from starting from where we are, the world of cause and effect, and then climbing one's way up to, kind of find a place where you can go beyond that world. But Dzogchen is famously characterized as a teaching that starts from the beyond cause and effect. It does not take the world. Cause and effect means basically the manifested world, not the universe, the three realms of the universe. Dzogchen tries or aims to set the disciple directly within a state that is beyond that condition, and from there to look kind of down or to look back and see how the phenomena are from that perspective, or how the reality, ultimate reality of phenomena are from that perspective. So another way to define the teaching, this teaching that is oftentimes found in the biography, is the definition of beyond effort. Okay, this is a very similar reasoning of the previous one, beyond cause and effect, because effort, if you think about, is always related to something. There is something, someone striving to something else, wanting to do something, wanting to change something. And here it is beyond effort, precisely for the reason I said before, because it starts from reaching the beyond effort. Okay. And again, another of the various ways that in the biographies the teaching is mentioned is or one instant, instantaneous. No, here you might some of you might recall the, let's say, polemic or the doctrinal opposition between gradualists and instantaneousists, or instantaneists, maybe better. But this is even beyond this polemic, because it does not refer to the same, level of teaching. Of course, it is not the case to go into this kind of topics here, but what is to be pointed out about this is that it is instantly reached. The moment in which the master introduces it to the student, there is no time that passes, precisely also because time is a condition of this cause and effect world. Okay, so this, generally speaking, is how the Dzogchen teaching is more or less more often mentioned in the biographies themselves. So now let's look at the biographies in particular, and at this point we will discover that there are two kinds of lineages or histories of lineages with regard to this to the early transmission of the Dzogchen teaching within our world. These two different lineages are belong, let's say, to two different parts of the Dzogchen teaching. So you might know that after Garabdorje taught the teachings themselves, Manjushri Mitra divided them into three series. No, his disciple Manjushri Mitra. We will maybe come back to him later on, one lineage is recalled in the Sende section of teaching, the section of the mind, which counts about 20 teachers or more from Garabdorje's disciple Manjushri Mitra down to Sri Simha. So it says this tradition is particularly represented by the text Vairundrabhag, the Mask of Vairochana, more or less it's called, I think. And from this perspective, you see, once again, not only are there different things that are being represented in biographies, but also different perspectives or points of view that report the same things in a different way. No, you may say, oh, so then very difficult to say that if this was a person or not. Yes, it is true, but that's not the main point. The main point is to find out what the different perspectives want to transmit as being their take on the topic. So more than 20 teachers from Manjushri Mitra to Sri Simha, and then to Vimala Mitra. Vimala Mitra is another key element, a key master in the transmission of the Dzogchen teachings from India to Tibet. The second lineage is more relative to the Longde and Mengate sides of the transmission. Longde is the space series, and Mengate is the pit instruction or secret instructions. You may know it under different names. And here there is a direct transmission, personal direct transmission from, or there is said to be this personal direct transmission from Garabdolje to Manjushri Mitra, and then directly to Sri Simha. So all these lengthy lineage of mentioned above of more than 20 teachers is reduced to direct, contact between Manjushri Mitra and Sri Simha. In fact, for example, Nyoju Kempo, who is the author of Masters of Marvelous Garland of Rare Gems, the text is translated into, considers this last lineage of the Longde and Mengate to be of symbolic transmission, meaning that in fact the transmission did not happen in a kind of verbose way, or in a way that is, like relative to ordinary beings, as most people nowadays transmit things. No, it's rather a Vidyadhara transmission by means of symbols. Okay, so by just showing a symbol, a whole teaching is transmitted, and the disciples kind of has the experience of that teaching within his mental continuum. So okay, then let's go to Sri Simha himself, okay, to the actual biography of Sri Simha himself. Mostly I will refer to the tradition that is that comes from the Longde and Mengate, because that one is the most well known, is the most widespread, and also the one that is easier to have access to. Nevertheless, I will try to also bring some examples from the other biography, the one from the Vairondabad. So Sri Simha means something like a glorious lion, and his full name appears to be Sri Simha Prabha, or Sri Simha Prabhata, which means the light or the luminescence of the lion, no? A luminous, luminescent lion. In general, this is something that is considered to be a characteristic of the sun. And in fact, symbolically speaking, Simha, the lion, is a symbol for the sun. No? So in a way, we can say he is a being that has been kind of defined by a kind of by assimilation to a son, obviously a spiritual son rather than a planetary son. So most of the biographies, by the way, which we have now from these Londe and Mengate traditions or cycles, have then been rewritten, let's say, by the great master Longchen Rajan, who is the main source for all of the masters these days. It is said that Longchenpa was kind of a unifier in the sense of he had received all the lineages that were kind of scattered around before him, and then so he configures himself as a kind of wellspring of the tradition that has been now passed down to our times. No? So already when he is born, his birth is a matter of controversy these days. Most of the time, and Longchenpa says so, this is a source for that information, Sri Simha is said to be born in a Chinese city called Shochan Napo. Now, this is obviously impossible to reconstruct from the point of view of the toponym of this place, Shochan Napo, because it's distinctly a Tibetan name. It is not, I would say, a translation or a transcription of a Sanskrit name, nor can I see there any Chinese origin in this toponym. Some people deny that he was born in China, and actually speaking, I think the problem is less of where he was born, but what his environment of birth was. Okay, so if we assume that it is very well possible that he was born in China, some parts in China, or say north or northeast of Tibet, or east of Tibet, but I believe more in the area of the Silk Road, no, in the desertic area that is now known as Xinjiang or Gansu, and he might very well have been born in an Indian environment, in an Indian family, because at that time, the Silk Route was a very fertile place of exchange and travel for Buddhist monks from India to China. Maybe it's useful to recall that the spread of Buddhism in China began many centuries before it began in Tibet. Okay, so in any case, be that as it may, Longchenpa says Gyagar. No, Gyagar is the Tibetan name for China. So it is also not possible to kind of infer that there was some ambiguity or something like that. That's straightforward with China. So his father was Gewa Dandempi Yichen, meaning also very strange to be a name, a personal name. It means something like that, something like having a mind that possesses virtue. Okay. And I mentioned this because it seems also these informations are kind of meant to configure something that is related to the teaching. No? They do not seem to be simply father and mother, any father and mother, but they have very high, doctrinally high sounding names. So we do not know also if Sri Simha was his given name since he was a child from early age, or if it's something he became known as later on. Sometimes maybe due to some episode in his um, in his later life. No, most of the Mahasiddhas, at a certain point, they have a defining adventure in their lives, and then that from that they receive also the name by which they are then later known to us. So Sri Simha, at the age of 15, started studying the five fields of knowledge, grammar, astrology, and so on and so forth, with the master Hasti Bahala. Again, this is typically Indian name, but there is no contradiction, I would say, in the sense that Indian masters, as I said earlier, were available in that part of the world. So one day he was walking to or traveling to the city of Serling, or the Golden Island, which in Sanskrit is Suvarna Dvipa, when Avalokiteshvara himself appeared to him in the sky and said, this I take from the above mentioned Nyoshu Kempo book. So he says, "Oh, fortunate one, if you definitely seek the goal in this single lifetime, go to the charnel ground of Soshadvipa to the west of the Vajra seat in India." Having said this, the deity vanished. So Sri Simha received this important message and decided to start to work into that direction. So he thought it was better before he went to this India, this place in India, to study the secret mantra tradition. And he spent 7 years doing so. And then he also studied with a master called Bhela Kirti, who was said to be an outcast. Also, this is an interesting information, because the world of the Siddhas, of the tantric teachers and so forth, is very much inclusive. Okay, it is it does not bear any, let's say, class or racial or gender prejudice. In fact, more or less, if one is fit, he can become any level of teacher in that kind of teaching. No, that is, I think, an interesting information. Also, it symbolizes and it means that the teaching is everywhere. Everywhere is dharma. No, so there can be nothing can be excluded from that. Let's say. So the place where he studied is said to be the five-peak mountain of Butaishan in China, which is very famously the one of the seats of the Bodhisattva Manjushri. So he, when he was ready with that, he mastered all the things that he had studied. He thinks it is difficult to travel to India from here. So he resolved to realize the siddhi, or the the power, the supranormal power, let's say, of swift-footedness, meaning that he could walk or float rather on one cubit, it is said, above the ground, and move very swiftly in the direction he likes. In that way, so he traveled to India, and he reached the great channel ground of Soshadvipa. Here he encountered the master Manjushri Mitra. Manjushri Mitra, as you might, for those of you who have more, acquaintance with this lineage, was the direct disciple in this lineage of Garabdogche. the one who received directly from his master his fifth instructions, and the one in whose biography a pattern starts that is then repeated in the biographies of all his then subsequent lineage holders. And this is that when their master is ready to, show the entrance into, or the, let's say, transcendence of suffering, if you like, or nirvana, or in this case, we would say, transcending both the opposition of samsara and nirvana, they kind of float in the air and dissolve into a ball of light in the sky. Then the disciple is obviously in distress and typically cries out to the master, who briefly then manifests back again in the sky and confers or bestows to the disciple a little casket or a little box made of some precious material. Generally, it's said to have the size of a nail, and this contains, in essence, is everything the disciple needs to, get his final enlightenment himself. Okay, and this is a pattern that repeats itself with each of his masters: Garadogya, Manjushri Mitra, Sri Simha, and his disciple Jnana Sutra. So, but when he got there, the Sri Simha prostrated to the master and then circumambulated him 3 times, making the request to take him under his care. So, yeah, the master accepted, and over some time passed him all the instructions and all that he had received from his master as well. The jeweled locket containing the testament of Manjushri Mitra was the text which is generally translated into the 6 meditative experiences, the testament of Manjushri Mitra. Also, Sri Simha was prophesied to be in the condition to be sort of destined, if you like, to retrieve all the text Manjushri Mitra had concealed in a boulder in Bodh Gaya, and then and this he did, and brought them back to the vicinity of a Bodhi tree in that was growing in China. So, in fact, this is a rather short biography of Sri Simha, in fact, and in other accounts of his life, he is also said to have traveled in many parts of South and Southeast Asia, like in Burma, in Sri Lanka, to the south of India, and particularly he was said to have spent a long time in the vicinity of the ancient Danyakataka stupa in Amaravati, in present-day Andhra Pradesh, I think. Yeah, it should be Andhra, not Telangana. So, from the point of view of his, let's say, of their work, we said earlier that Manjushri Mitra divided all the teachings that he had received from Guru Garadogchen and divided them in the 3 series of Sende, Longde, and Menyate, or mind space or expands and pit instructions, secret instructions. Sri Simha divided these texts again, particularly the Mengate series, into outer, inner, secret, and utmost secret, or utmost unsurpassable secret. So, Chi Nansang and Yang Sang Lanamet in Tibet. So, this text, in fact, he concealed in some precise places, and in order for them to be found at later times when they were when the times were ready and when they manifested a the suitable, is the word, the suitable successor to do so. In fact, after this, he went to live in a charnel ground, according to this biography, the charnel ground of Sijin, and stayed there for more or less the rest of his days, or the rest of the time he wanted to spend in this dimension. His disciples are extremely important, particularly in the view of transmitting this particular teaching to Tibet. His main disciple was Jnana Sutra. Jnana Sutra was again has a very similar biography to Sri Simha. So he was born, in fact, interesting. Biographies of Vimalamitra and Jnana Sutra are often mentioned together, sort of. They are born into different places, but then they meet and they become very close friends, and they study together and all that. And at a certain point, they get a prophecy in which Sri Simha is said to be the master from which they ought to beseech the teachings beyond the cause and effect, and or however it's defined in that sense. So Vimalamitra said, "I'm going. No, I go to see this master," while Jnana Sutra stayed back. In short, Vimalamitra went to see Sri Simha. He prostrated, circumambulated, and was accepted as a disciple. These are all, you see, very nearly regular patterns, sort of, no? So they have a structure that repeats itself in the lives of these different masters. So Vimalamitra went to Sri Simha. He received all the teaching, but he was not able to kind of, as they say in Tibetan, Nyam Sulen, no? To draw them into his experience, not to translate them into something that is his direct experience of the content, the goal, and the meaning of the teaching themselves. So he came back, met Jnana Sutra, who asked him how it was, and so on and so forth. And Vimalamitra said, of course, I met this very great master. And Jnana Sutra also went to see him, and he was identified as the successor to Sri Simha, the lineage successor. So he received all the teachings and all the, in the end, the casket with the testament of Sri Simha, which is called the Seven Nails, all these texts are very essential and short, these testaments. And so Jana Sutra then came back to India or to Odhyana. Of course, according to some, the theater of this is Odhyana, this part in north west India, and for some others, more general locations in India itself. So, for example, Bodh Gaya and so forth. So when he came back, Vimalamitra saw that Jana Sutra was, had realized what he couldn't, and asked to become his disciple. So Jana Sutra accepted him, and Vimalamitra became the follower in the lineage of Jana Sutra himself. Two other extremely important masters that were disciples of Sri Simha and crucial to bring the teaching to Tibet were Padmasambhava and Guru Padmasambhava, the very famous tantric master, for whom I don't think there is any need to introduce him, and the translator Vairochana. By the way, with Vairochana, after he reached Sri Simha in India or in Odhyana, after a very, very difficult travel, traditionally in the biography of Vairochana, it is said that he endured 16 great hardships by traveling to see his master, to find his master. He also translated a reasonable number of text together with Sri Simha. In particular, the tradition that was transmitted from Sri Simha to his disciples was then came to be known as the Kandrunyitik, the innermost essence of the Dakins, or something, the heart essence of the Dakins. There are many ways to translate this, and unfortunately, the translations sometimes are not easy to be brought back to the original Tibetan, but that's another sort of problem. So this Kandrunyitik is said to be the core or the general meaning that, the general name that is given to this cycle of teachings. And in general, it could be said that they are somehow referring to the transmission of the clear light, the clear light tradition of India that came from India to Tibet, but it was a particular perspective on this kind of teaching, a typically Dzogchen teaching, and it is said by some to have been divided into two classes or two categories, namely the teachings for the day and the teachings for the night, or the daytime teachings and the nighttime teachings. So Padmasambhava, I would like to spend a few final words on Padmasambhava. I had the idea to also include other things, but time is going. So Guru Padmasambhava also heard of the teaching beyond cause and effect, the teaching beyond the effort, and the teaching in one instant or instant teaching, timeless instant teaching. So he heard that there was a master living in a charnel ground, and he went there instantly. It was already some realization, some siddhis in his, you know, in his, at his disposal. How do you say? Sometimes the words do not come to me. So he had the possibility of the siddhi of swift traveling, instant traveling even. So he went to the channel ground and found Sri Simha there. Again, he prostrated. In this aspect, in this particular way to look at the biography of Guru Padmasambhava as an important transmitter of the Dzogchen teaching to Tibet, he has a kind of a section of separate biography, let's say, that belongs to that very you know, context. And interesting to say, some master once said, I don't remember exactly who it was, that Padmasambhava has as many biographies as many biographies as it has devotees or followers, no? Or people who accept his teachings, let's say. So he went to this channel ground, he prostrated, he begged to be accepted and was accepted as his student. And then Sri Simha gave him all the teachings of the great perfection, Dzogchen, and gave him all the text and teaching and instructions belonging to the Sende, Londe, and Mengate cycles. So the mind, the expanse, and the secret instructions. So then further, Padmasambhava requested more teaching on the disappearance of the bodily aggregates in this very life, no? The ones on, you know, body of light or rainbow body or whatever. And also he was granted. And in particular, it seems that these were the teaching that were the core of what Sri Simha passed on, transmitted, because he's saying that the teaching that he's going to give him, he accepted obviously, and was the heart essence of the Dakini, you know, the Kando Nyingtik. So it is said that these teachings are beyond thought and free from intellectualization, and they descend from they transcend the domain of consciousness. They lie beyond the confines of existence and non-existence, and they are not an object of the view and meditation or development and completion. All this is rather technical language, and it is better understood, in my opinion, when looked at the Tibetan, if you can, or you know, with an explanation of these lines. In any case, these ultimate and unsurpassed key instructions, which bring to the enlightenment of Buddhahood, will be in the time of 3 years, it is said. These teachings I will grant to you, Sri Simha said to Padmasambhava. So it is to come back to the, this is, so to say, the more urban tradition, the more, let's say, how to say, acceptable, if you like, or normal, if you like, representation of the way how Sri Simha imparted his teachings to Guru Padmasambhava. But, for example, one tradition has it that in which the symbolic nature of how the transmission happened is more evident, more prevalent. So it is said that, for example, while transmitting the lineage to Padmasambhava, Sri Simha transformed or reduced Padmasambhava himself, the body of Padmasambhava, into a small hum syllable in presumably Tibetan letters or Indian letters, and put it on his tongue and swallowed it. So after a while, he then expelled it from the other side. And during this journey within the body of Sri Simha, it is said that Guru Padmasambhava received all the let's say, the experience of the teachings as they were within Sri Simha himself, no? Realized within the body. Obviously, this is a way to kind of represent the communion of minds that happens in this kind of transmission between master and disciple. In a way, their minds understood as their nature of the minds, if you like, but also their perception of it or their awareness of it become kind of non-dual, no? They merge one within the other. And then for the purpose of teaching, then they separate, apparently they separate once again. Padmasambhava then went to Tibet and gave these teachings, it is said, to Yeshe Tsogyal and a few others. But rather more crucial into the transmission of the Dzogchen teachings to Tibet was where the two Vimalamitra and Vairochana in particular also, well, both of them were very important in this context, in this sense. Okay, so I hope it was clear enough. It was entertaining enough. And I would now see if there are some questions. As you said. Sorry,
thank you so much, Fabian.
Sometimes it's not easy to talk to a screen while looking out of the window. So I'm sorry if I hear that it was not so easy to understand or I did not express myself. Okay, so if there are any questions, Jamyang, are you moderating? Hi, Julia. Jamyang is probably his connection.
Hey Fabian, I'm just trying to get a gallery view, but I can't. So I'm going to have to talk from the void. I'm going to have to talk from the void. Um, I'd just like to ask a question. First of all, thank you so much. It's so interesting to hear, you know, these bits of information about Sri Simha, because he's so important, but you hardly ever hear any details. Can you just say something more about the way that this lineage works? Because I'm quite interested, you know, that from Manjusri Mitra, you know, it went, there was a lot of kind of people who he transmitted to in the Semde lineage. And then also from Sri Simha, it went both to Janasutra, Vimalamitra, and to Padmasambhava. So does that then become like 3 different lineages, or is there like a principal lineage holder, or quite how does that work? Just this Tibetan lineage business.
Yeah, thanks for the question. In fact, yes, it is true that the biographies of these early masters of the Dzogchen tradition are very scant and short and synthetic, let's say, to the point that many today, several scholars, they don't hold them even to have ever existed in any form, so to say, no? Or do not consider the informations to be historical or no, something like that. In any case, and also it's difficult to kind of extrapolate them from the different texts in which they are mentioned and so on and so forth. For example, recently I had the occasion to translate a text from the Vairogya Boom, and which is, as you might know, the collection of the translations that Vairochana made, some together with Sri Simha himself, and some on his own or with other masters. And Sri Simha was mentioned there, and he was mentioned as a kind of, you know, not very much like a side note, let's say, within the text. But it was said like how he transmitted the text to some disciples. I don't remember now who the disciple was, but he kind of was dressed as a, it's not clear if he was a beggar or a thief, and that he went into a pit by night, you know, to transmit closely to this disciple the teaching from one-to-one only, no? So I'm mentioning this to show that you might sometimes you see the master mentioned some here and there, but then it's difficult to reconnect it to the general biography. Now, when was that? Where was that? I don't know. It's just a mention. So if to put everything together, drawn from these secondary mentions and so forth, is really, I would say, nearly impossible. As for the you know, lineage, in this particular tradition, that one that is mostly you know, coming from Longchenpa, or Longchenpa is the one who kind of standardized it in this way. Then Sri Simha had as his main student, his lineage successor, let's say, the Jana Sutra. No, he was his main student. When he came back to India, then he transmitted what he had received to Vimalamitra. Vimalamitra was his, you know, childhood companion. No, we mentioned him earlier. Vimalamitra also went to Tibet and was, you know, invited by the king and so forth. But he came there a little bit later. For example, it is said that he spent something like 20 years as the ritual officer, and maybe officer, I should not say, the ritual, let's say, priest, for lack of a better word, and the guru of the king in the kingdom of Kamarupa in Assam. No, these days it's still there. The main temple there is called Kamarupa in Guwahati in Assam. And I would not say that the three main masters that are in this context considered to be the main transmitters of the teaching from India to Tibet did produce distinct lineages. No, maybe the teaching of Guru Padmasambhava is more on the side of the Megate. Kind of they concentrated more on this, more on that. Vairochana, for example, I think he was more concerned with transmitting the Sende Tantras, no? With translating them and transmitting the Sende Tantras. So also Guru Padmasambhava transmitted his teachings, but only to a few disciples who then were ordered to hide the teachings, which were then later to be rediscovered as Dharma teachings. And Vimalamitra also went to Tibet, and I think after he was invited by the king and gave his teaching there. Also, he was, I think, instrumental in convincing the king to call back Vairochana from his exile in eastern Tibet. No, he was exiled for some reason. I don't remember exactly for what reason. So I do not think that they kind of maybe, yeah, they produce different streams of the transmission, no? And then what it's at least some Tibetan masters consider that these transmissions that we may assimilate in a way to the Kama, Terma and Megate traditions were unified then into Longchenpa, okay? And from Longchenpa onwards, they were kind of unified, no? So to say. But they were not sort of different lineages, but more like, I think, of course, my knowledge is very limited in this, not only in this, but it seems that they were more like stages rather than different, no, stages of the transmission. How all these different mass of text. In fact, it's quite conspicuous also in terms of size, no? Were transmitted to Tibet, but it's really difficult to say. In fact, I hope I have more or less answered the question.
Thank you, Fabian. And I'll tell you the image that's coming into my head. It's of like a river. And you know how a river can divide into different sort of rivulets, if you like. Yes. And then maybe later on it can join again into the same.
Definitely.
So it's like it has a source, but then it can sort of divide up and then come back again into one, or it can divide into two. I don't know.
Absolutely.
It's
absolutely. And in any case, I think that the procedure, how they do in generally in Tibet is, I'm talking now in more, let's say, worldly terms, no, our experience, no, let's say more or less, or the experience of Tibetans in recent centuries, is that a master transmits a part, then he sees that the disciple has certain obstacles, certain characteristics. He is good in some things, less in others. So he sent him to another master to get another kind of teaching, no? In which maybe that master is more concentrated. But nevertheless, all of them, generally speaking, possess the transmission of all of the whole corpus of teachings. then what the corpus is then changes, of course, from time to time and from place to place. What the corpus exactly is. No?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you. So there is a question in the chat.
It's more of a thank you note, I believe.
Yes, it's not a question. Yes, and I'm sorry. In fact, this is not a topic on which well, it's the first time I talk on this kind of topics, particularly the DZOGCHEN early lineage. But so I had to do quite some research, and really the problem was not to find everything that was available on Sri Simha, but rather how to fill an hour with what was to be found about Sri Simha, because really his biography, his life story is extremely synthetic and short. No, of course there are other things I left out. For example, the episode when which is described in the other set of biographies, in the coming from the more from the Sende tradition, in which he has a more for those who are familiar with it, more a Milarepa Marpa style encounter with the teacher. No? So basically the teacher Manjushri Mitra behaves in strange ways. No, he's not even sure that he has identified the correct person, and like for example, when he goes to see him, he's plowing a field. Then he sends him home to his wife, and she prepares 6 sparrows for him to eat. And then you know, later on, for example, they serve him the left arm of a lady with 5 bracelets, and so on and so forth. It's a very complicated description. For this reason, I ended up leaving it, you know, as a kind of reserve topic. And in any case, later on, there is an explanation of what all these gestures by Manjushri Mitra mean towards his not yet or his disciple to be. Okay, yeah, so for this reason, sorry for being sometimes a bit too notion oriented. No? I thought maybe most of people this time might be, the audience might be, of course, I don't see you, so I cannot have any feedback, but I thought mostly it would be people who have a continuity with the DZOGCHEN teachings and so forth.
Fabian, I just had an idea. If you remove your screen sharing and the picture of Sri Simha, maybe then I can get like gallery view and everyone can see each other. I don't know if that's why.
Well, yeah, gallery, but
okay.
Most of the people have the video off, I think.
Okay, so now I can see that Peter has his hand up, for example. I can see everyone.
Yes. Are you saying hello or asking for a question?
Question.
Okay.
And you can hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. So thank you, first of all. Thank you. And I found it very interesting, and I like the bits and pieces that have stuck with me so far, and more will come. You know, it'll sit with me. I wanted to say, is it safe to say that when the biographies, they don't mean to prove anything historically necessarily, but they mean to teach.
Yes.
That was a real gem. I mean, I've thought that you articulated it nicely, and I could apply that to and all the biographies. Really.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
In that order of idea, in the end, everything that is done is a teaching.
Yes. Yes.
There is no. We also very often have the attitude to think that people in all eras and in all places have more or less the same mentality we have, no? Modern Western people, no?
Mm.
But I think for those, practitioners who put together these biographies, no? Be it on the base or be it actually on some, visionary experience or whatever as a base, no? What was their purpose was to actually to do the benefit of beings. That is what a Buddhist master is interested in, or should be interested in.
Yes.
So he does so by what they call skillful means, no? And skillful means is not bringing the mind essence down to the empiric world, or secularizing, saying, this day, on this date, this happened. No, it's completely useless. It does not have, because in itself, it is just something that is belonging exclusively to the rolling of cause and effect.